Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingsar. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Thanks to BizSimply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner, and BizSimply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, rota and operations software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, to how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. Together we want to share strategies and tools that can make the industry thrive long term, not just survive.
What are you doing every day to demonstrate those things you talk about? And again, because people will pick up on that and they will see that you're trying to be good and make good in the world. And it's just these small human things you do for your community that compound over time. As counterintuitive it feels, because you think, oh, we've got to do loads of ads, we've got to reach so many people, but actually it's customers one by one, increasing that emotional engagement that you have with them.
This is Dan Nash, who is the founder of SixEight Agency, an agency that helps food brands turn their customers into a cult of superfans. Today we dive into how to be a cult brand and why you should care. We also talk about how you can tell and scale your story so it has a huge impact on now and in the future for your brand and your sales. We talk about the importance of having clarity on the purpose, vision and mission of a business if you want to stand out in an ever-crowded market. Dan also shares the roadmap of how to get started with building a cult brand, his own learnings from the last 2 years helping cult brands, and what he believes brands need to do if they want to be successful in the new era of hospitality. Before you tune in, please sign up for a weekly newsletter, Maverick Talk, which is packed with more Maverick insights, strategies and tools. Find a link in the show notes or visit hospitalitymavericks.com. Time now to learn more about how to build a cult brand. This conversation will make you question your current branding activities and find out how you really can stand out when it both comes to the employee and customer perception. Grab your notebook and enjoy. Today we will have a journey into how you build a cult brand, or as I call it, raving fans. That goes both, I guess, for customers, but also for the employees. And for that, I have Dan with me here on the show. And we talked a couple of times about what we should be talking about today. And we both agree there's a huge opportunity to talk about actually how do you actually tell your story better as a hospitality/restaurant business. So welcome to the show, Dan. I'm really excited about today's conversation.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And then for people that haven't heard about you and your journey and what your business is up to, could you just talk a bit about why we're sitting here, talking about storytelling, branding, cult brands, and so on, and why you are the man?
Sure. So yeah, my favorite subject that I love to talk about a lot, and really the purpose of my business is I love to help obsessive food brands, and by obsessive I mean brands that are obsessed about their product and the experience they create for their customers, and who are trying to make more impact with their product beyond just making money, and how they can turn their customers into a cult following, turn their customers into a tribe of loyal superfans.
How has your journey been to do that? Because you have not always spent your time in hospitality and food, but you come from the outside, so you come and look at the hospitality world probably in a very different way.
Sure. And actually sometimes it's good to be, one thing I've learned is it's quite good to be naive. Like I came in very naive with no preconceptions with the industry. So I started 5 years ago. I was, to be honest, trying and failing to be a digital nomad in Thailand, which is a whole story in itself. But that's also what's inspired me to work with food. Food's in my blood. My grandma had a restaurant. I'm obsessed with Asian food because we ate a lot of Chinese food when I was a kid. And I remember going to university and being broke. So I learned to sort of recreate all the food that I missed. And yeah, actually, Anthony Bourdain, Kitchen Confidential was a book I read at a very early age, which just blew my mind about restaurants. It was like, okay, this is why they're so interesting. So ever since then, I've really sort of been obsessed just about restaurants and the experience and everything that leads up to that first bite that you have, and why it's so important. And just so there I was in Thailand, let's say a little bit lost and confused because I'd left my corporate life behind. And just there comes a point in your life when you think, I'm not getting any younger. It's time to go in for what I love. Let's see if I can build a career out of food. And what really inspired me to do this was, as someone that just loves communication, when I started looking into it, I looked into all these amazing restaurants with these great stories. But then I looked on their Instagrams and I was like, but this is boring. Like you've got this great story. Why are you just talking about? Why are you just talking about your product in this very dry way? And because I was naive, I thought, well, maybe I can do better than that. So I ended up harassing. I knew David, the founder of Chicken Sours, a little bit, and ended up harassing him for a job. And eventually, again, the power of harassing people. After a few months, we've just got some investment to launch this new chain as a QSR brand from Chicken Sours, which is called Chicken, which is now called Chicken Shop. Would you like to get involved for the launch? So of course I said yes. And that's really where my journey started. And I mean, I'm sure we can talk about this a bit more, but that first campaign, despite being one of the most stressful things I've ever worked on, but I ended up smashing that launch with a very unconventional campaign, exactly because I was such an outsider. And that's really informed how I do things ever since. So I've embraced my outsider status.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because also you mentioned, I want to come back to something you mentioned, Anthony Bourdain, and what is that thing that you, when you saw his program and happening in these kitchen, because you're not the only one that said that to me, but it's like there's something about kitchens and restaurants and you know that feeling that you know that what ticks people. What was it for you that did it?
Well, I think it's the same thing for me as well. I think for other people, it's like we all just have this primal connection to food. People love food stories. You know, like 7 out of 10 people watch cooking shows in the UK. So this is what so many restaurants sort of ignore because people want to know more about this. And I know I'm not the only one that wants to know more. And it's like anything. The more you know about something, the more that you love, the more that passion increases. So his whole thing was that just from the minute you walk into the door, every single aspect is going to affect that first bite of food. And I mean, I'm a naturally curious person as well. So it was just when you get to sort of peek under the hood, it just was like, oh, so it's so much more. It's not just that plate of food, and then everything that goes ahead. That, again, because I love it, that 10x my emotional attachment. Because it was all the stuff that led up to that, and not just in the restaurant, but their stories, the stories of the chefs, their backgrounds, how they came to that. And the other thing with Anthony Bourdain was that he just communicated it in a very thrilling, exciting way. And yes, a little bit of that was an earlier time when maybe if you weren't a white male, that wasn't such a great time to be in a kitchen, and or even just for mental health. You know, that's probably where it's still acceptable to brand people with a hot knife or throw a saucepan at their head. So it's easy to make it sound very rock and roll, but there was there was also at a price for a lot of people working in hospitality. But it was still very exciting, and it's not easy because to communicate is a hard skill. So it was just how you take something maybe quite intangible and make it suddenly very exciting and educational at the same time.
Yeah, and I think when you get it, you find out it's such a complex business that is moving on so thin leg sometimes to just about surviving or just about to having that breakthrough. We also mentioned that because you were an outsider, your approach was different. It was almost like counterintuitive to what you have seen on your first project you work with, where like you launched a new brand or an offshoot of a chicken sours where actually you did something that this is not the norm. This is not how we will normally do a restaurant launch or communicate about a restaurant launch. Can you talk a bit about the milestones and your learnings from that and what really worked well there?
Sure. So, I mean, I only had 3 months to do this, and I should add, so never worked at restaurants, I've never done social media for business. So knew that I could communicate, but it was a skill that I'd kept buried when I used to work in marketing jobs before then. Um, and so, yeah, it was a tough time, but then it was fun. It was as soon as I started communicating, it just all started flowing out of me. But what the thinking, there was some thinking behind what I was doing was, so we were going to launching in Baker Street, which is a very challenging location. And yes, it was from an existing brand, but it was still, for all intents and purposes, a new brand. And we had this offer that the first 50 people would get free. The first 50 people in line when we opened would get free fried chicken for a year. So it's quite a sexy offer. I mean, a lot of people have done it since then, but at the time that was quite new. So, I mean, the first thing is because you want to pattern interrupt and grab attention as much as possible for a launch. So that certainly worked, but it was still in a challenging location with a relatively unknown brand. And I thought, if I just do what everyone else does, and what everyone else does, I always call it the 10% of your story, which is where you just talk about your product, your team, and your interiors in a very dry way with very little personality. No one's going to connect with that, because when I was researching, I saw that no one seems to care. That doesn't get any engagement. So that, how am I going to get a line of people outside here? What works? And I just thought, well, people come to social media because they want to listen to other humans. That's what they interact with. They don't interact with brands. Or if it is a brand, it's what's behind that brand. Who are the humans behind that brand? So then I just went and just thought, right, I've just got to tell a very honest and human story. And I've pretty much got to run the page like it's my own personal account, because people are going to connect with that, which was quite a bold move and very anxiety inducing. And that still scares a lot of people in hospitality. And I always actually say to people in hospitality, generally, like, you'd be better off running your personal page, your brand page, like your personal page, and you get way more results from that. So I was just very honest. And I just said, we're very scared about launching in Baker Street, and this is why, and these are all our challenges. Like, I really charted the journey every day, every week of what we were trying to do. It was a QSR chain, but I was very clear that we're not just a chain. This comes from humans who do what they do because they love what they do. I went really deep into the process, because I believe as well that people buy your process just as much as the product. I had fun. Like, it was quite an edgy brand, so I don't believe in controversy for the sake of it. But we had like KFC a few doors down, so I pick on them a little bit. Things like that, sharing stupid sort of memes and GIFs, and also just sharing, as I said, I was running it as like my account. So I just shared, I knew that people love food. So I just talked about food generally. If we went out to a good restaurant or we're just trying a new product, I just share it, and people would really go for it. So that's the sort of easy, I'd say, and that it just became a story that people wanted to pick up and could get behind, because they could see we were the good guys, they could see we were trying, and they could also see, because we were talking about this process so much, that we had an offer. It wasn't just fried chicken, it was much more than that. And it was a story that people could get behind. And look, of course, there was a hell of a lot of hustle behind that as well. I was kicking the doors open into any local office, just saying, please try our food. Here is, what do you think about it? Really trying to build a lot of those local connections, because I think a lot of people overlook the importance of local marketing and those human connections, because those are going to be your biggest brand champions and brand lovers. The usual running Facebook ads and all that other kind of marketing stuff as well. So to one extent, we threw the kitchen sink at it. But on the other hand, I'd say it was just having a very unconventional story, a real honest human story. And it was because I was so naive and fresh, I didn't quite realize what I'd achieved. But I just remember running up the stairs to Baker Street at 6 a.m. as it was opening, thinking, maybe at best there might be a few people here, full of anxiety. Like, if I failed everyone, everyone's looking at me. And there was a line of people snaking around the block. People had camped overnight for it. And again, it was just afterwards that when we started talking to people more, that they just said, we'd never seen a campaign like that. For a QSR, just to talk about all this stuff, this kind of unconventional stuff, it just stood out. So it's that counterintuitive thing where it feels really uncomfortable, but actually, if you want to get results quickly, don't be like everyone else.
Yeah, and it is about that. Find out how you really stand out. Just don't say, as you say things that's controversy for the sake of it, but actually they really resonate with the brand and why it's doing what it's doing. I really like that. So again, in principle, what happened there, I guess, is what you do now as well. You found out you can actually build raving fans from day one with a brand in the up to the opening of a restaurants. But how do we actually build a brand with raving fans? Because we all want these fans that saves us no matter what. In bad times they're there to keep the business going, and it's good time they tell all their friends about it. The free marketing tool that every marketing director dreams of. So we have to spend a little less on paid marketing and advertising and so on. So how do you actually build a brand with raving fans is my question.
Sure. And this again, so this is from my perspective of doing it, so this is just one approach. But I would say the absolute fundamental, regardless of who you are, is you have to do the work. You have to build a framework of your brand before you start looking at the activities you do. And this is when I started, this is how I built my cult brand system. Was because we kept rushing into the marketing, and it was just without doing any of the pre-work. And what it meant was it was so inefficient because we kept having to do all these approvals and constantly getting the time of the founders to do it. Whereas we would have taken the work to the time to do the work beforehand, it would have flowed so much faster. And also the story just wasn't as good because you got to take the time to do the work to get everything out your head about why you're doing, why it's important, relating it to your audience. So when I look, if you look at any successful brand that has passionate fans, number one thing is they tend to offer something unique, a unique product that you can't get anywhere else. The second thing is offering an incredible experience, making that experience as great as possible. So those are fundamentals, but it's so much easier to do that when you have a framework for why you're doing it and how you communicate those things as well. So the first place really is to start with the framework of your brand, which is really like who you are, why it's important, who your audience is, and why should they care about you and come to you over anyone else, and then the framework to communicate that. And then the second part really is just building in your purpose and being a human brand from day one, because it never gets any easier. And again, for me, what being a great brand is just getting more love from your customers. So especially like say, if you're starting off, I remember it's someone asked this question to some of the top CMOs in the world of like, what do you invest? How much do you invest in branding and how much in marketing? And they were generally pretty much 50-50. And I know, especially in the beginning, there's a massive pressure to get sales in. So sometimes those ratios can fluctuate, but there has to be a baseline of 20-30% of your activities around brand, which again is how do I get more love from your customers? And again, so it's telling that real honest human story. And it's not just saying we're perfect. Generally people it's just buy my shit. That is the state of most food marketing. It's a brochure. It's not what people go to, why people go to social media. So you want to move, and that's what everyone else does, is just the product team and interiors, essentially come to my restaurant, buy my shit. Whereas instead, to really turn people into raving fans, you've got to talk about everything surrounding your brand and why you do what you do. So share that journey, share where you're trying to get to, and just say that we're just humans trying to make good in the world. We're trying to get to that higher purpose. Maybe it's going to happen, maybe it won't. And it also creates a lot more drama, and people can really get behind you when you're sharing this more dramatic, emotional journey. Stand up for your audience, stand up for the shared beliefs that you have with them. Be willing to say no to things in principle in public. That's to be an authentic brand. And the other thing really is just know you've got to obsess about who your audience are and know what they're into, and show that you're the leader for them, that you talk about the things that are important to them as well, which can be directly related to your business or indirectly related to your business as well. And then just a final part to that is doing things for your community. So for me, brand storytelling is a lot about communicating, but if you just talk, it's greenwashing, like we can all talk a big game. We can all talk about sustainability. And this again is like building a purpose in from day one. What are you doing every day to demonstrate those things you talk about? And again, because people will pick up on that and they will see that you're trying to be good and make good in the world. And it's just, and it's just these small human things you do for your community that compound over time. As counterintuitive it feels, because you think, oh, we've got to do loads of ads, we've got to reach so many people, but actually it's customers one by one, increasing that emotional engagement that you have with them. So it's doing, so as part of that is what are the things that you can do as well, not just say to get more, to turn those customers into raving fans, whether it's doing just events or rewarding your most loyal brand lovers, or just, how do we surprise and delight people with every touch point that we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love that thing where you dovetail it with that thing that you actually, that thing about giving. And it doesn't matter, how big you can do it. You can do it in small scale, but you are really authentic about it, and you are in that front line and delivering. You're not maybe. I'm maybe a bit cynical about planting trees as your only strategy for doing good for the world, because there's so many other things you could do where you can change a young person's life, or you could feed people, especially in hospitality, the ability to feed people, and especially in the times we go into now, and not just do it for the publicity, but actually doing because you really care about that, or you have a connection to that, and you can tell that story. And I met a operator that really cares about what old people eat, get of food at home. And because he was really upset about that, because he had a family member, he really got into the local community of improving that, and now created a better catering company, which the council now buys from instead. It's an incredible story. But that started with one meal, and then he started delivering food to 5 people in that area, and then it just expanded, and suddenly the council could see, oh, that food is much better than what we get there. So yeah, that's so interesting. When you really, really set yourself to do something, you can really make change, and that some of the, not just feeling good about it, but also really good business in the end.
100%. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be these huge, we're going to be zero waste by tomorrow, by next year. It can just be small things, and really small things, just for your team, for your local community. And it can just be things. It could just be having, just inspiring people a bit, just having a bit of fun as well, because so much of the communication is just boring. Get what can you do online on your Instagram to get people interacting with you more and getting to feedback more on your journey, or just, if they're on your booking form, could you just make someone smile a little bit and laugh? It could just be small things like that, just small things like that, or just educating a bit about, if you're an Italian restaurant, just giving people something they didn't know before about, so it's, an ingredient or a vegetable, so they just still walk away with even just a little bit more, is still way more than what most people do.
What about one of the things you were talking about before, that a lot of hospitality business or restaurants, when they launch, it's all about the product, there's a bit about the team, there's maybe a bit about the suppliers, the 10% you call it, they only talk about the 10%. And I think that's about that ability to tell the story. I call it scale the story, because that has actually bigger impact than your ability to open lots of sites. Actually, the ability to scale the story is what I have learned myself, and what I hear, some very savvy investors, they ask this question. So, how are you gonna scale the story? And then you probably start, as I did the first time I had that question. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you now. We're gonna hire these people. We're gonna use this agent. We're gonna find so many sites, and sales is gonna no. How are you gonna tell the seed of the story to actually make this happen? The magic. How are you gonna tell the real stories of you as the founder, or you as the business owners, or why you are so different, and how you're going to scale that on a huge level when you open more sites, and how you're actually going to reach people that maybe never going to buy for you, but still think you're great, like Patagonia. Many people have never ever bought anything from Patagonia, the clothing company, but really knows what it is and supports its purpose.
In terms of scaling a story, I mean, one interesting thing, and I hear this come up with founders quite a lot, is as they get bigger. So quite often when they start small, it will be quite a human story. And it's, like, this is just me in my kitchen on Instagram with my new startup. And I think it was the guy from Solo Coffee recently just said, the issue was, as they got bigger, they felt this pressure to suddenly do the corporate voice and do, as I said, suddenly we can't talk about all that stuff because we're a business, we've got investors. and just looking, and then all you're doing is looking around at what the other bigger guys are doing around you, who aren't necessarily doing the right thing. And so that it's this counterintuitive thing where you think the bigger you get, the less the less you can tell an honest story, and you just have to keep it very, like, again, buy my shit. Whereas then you're forgetting about the original reason that why people got involved, why people love you in the first place. And actually, if you keep doing it, that's how you're going to stand out. And so I mean, I've got my own, I call it my minimum viable story framework. So I have a few things that I check off to make sure that you are telling this well-rounded story. And as you say, to scale, look, you can't, if you're a founder and you're scaling, you can't be there every day being involved very directly in the whole communication process. But that's why, again, it's so important to do the work up front and get everything out the head of anyone whose story is relevant, whether it's the head chef, whether it's the founders, and getting that all out. And then it depends. Look, this isn't easy doing this brand story stuff. It's hard, it's uncomfortable. It means saying no to other things. And it depends how important it is for you. Because how much, the more you are willing to put into it, the more, because what's quite often, especially so often in marketing and hospitality, is it's very often operator led. So it was started by an operator who doesn't really have much brand and marketing experience. They'll hire a marketing person and just pretty much say, like, get on with it. Like, no training. So it's very hard for them. And they're just looking around at what everyone else is doing as well. And so again, so it's not, again, just having a framework then makes it much easier for anyone else to pick up and play. But you need to be there involved. I always like to recommend every 3 months, you just do a story brain dump. Like, where are we? How are our customers changing? How's our market changing? What cool things? And then just, it's all those little details. Like, did you listen to any good podcasts? Were you trying anything in the kitchen? Did you read a good book? And just having that as a bit of a process. So yeah, if you do the work up front and you have the framework, you should be good to go. But the more, as a founder or the other key stakeholders are willing to be involved in that process, the more powerful the story will be and the more human it's going to look. So it's just how much of a priority that is for you.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting what you said there with the founders as well. Do you think sometimes that the founders really don't get enough in front of the business from the early days? Some people maybe hide a bit behind. I know there's some founders there straight on Instagram. There's a Nisha from Mowgli is a great example that she's very much in front of the business from day one. And the power of that today, as they have scaled the business, is like, she scaled the story at the same time.
Yeah. And look, it's not fair and it's not right, because most hospitality people started their business because they just want to make great food and hopefully make the world a better place. And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, what, we've got to do all this Instagram stuff. I'm like, I didn't make those rules. In some ways, I wish it wasn't like that, because I know how much extra stress it puts, but that is what it is. And again, I sometimes ask people, like, how bad do you want it? Like, do you really want to grow faster than the rest? Do you really want to stand out? Because people need to see the people that are behind it. And that's sometimes, it's funny, because to launch a food business means you have to do so many hard, uncomfortable things. And then when it comes to sharing the story, or let's say putting your face out there or making videos, suddenly people start freezing up and it's just so hard and uncomfortable. I hear this again and again, and it's just obviously a human thing. It was hard for me in the beginning. I had to force my way through it. But ultimately it's just another hard, uncomfortable thing that once you cross will make your life better and make your business grow faster. So it's just, yeah, I come up against this block a lot, and I'm not saying like it's easy, but I've also seen the results of the people that are willing to embrace getting behind it and putting themselves out there more.
What about the operators that is very clear about, like their vision, their purpose, their mission, their values? Does that help them as they are building, because everybody wants to have a cult brand, if you look into what that means, because that's very good business. But these people that really succeed with it, we can take Ben and Jerry's, you would have Honest Burgers here in the UK. I think they're very clear about, where they're going to. Maybe wasn't from day one, but they definitely evolved and articulated that vision, purpose, and so on as they moved on. Do you agree with that? And that's like one of the secret thing, but also one of the really very big task and hard work to evolve.
Yeah, and I mean, this is always a point where people start rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, it's the brand guy talking about charging me lots of money for my purpose, vision, mission, and values, and we paid a brand agency and nothing happened." But I think that Honest and Ben& Jerry's are great examples. And actually, I did a market research for a client a while back and just said, "Which brands do you admire and why?" And exactly those two came up: Ben& Jerry's because they're unapologetic about what they believe in, Honest because they live to their name and they're honest, and they could see over the pandemic that they were doing good things. And I've heard the founders of Honest talk and say, "Honest is our mantra. We are honest about everything that we do." And they could see this is the crucial thing, that Honest are one of the good guys. We trust them. That is, you don't get a cult brand, you don't get loyalty until people trust you, until they can see who you are. And so, yes, I think it's very important. It's actually the number one foundational step of my cult brand system. I call it brand substance, which is your purpose, mission, vision, and values. But the difference between just being something you spend a fortune on, a brand agency that lives in a PDF gathering virtual dust, versus being a living, breathing document is, and when I work with people, is that, what are you going to do to make this real? Your purpose, your why that's bigger than money. Okay. What are you doing every day for that? Your vision, where do you want to get to? Which can be a whole mix of things, like what are you doing to reach that vision? Your mission, which is for me your manifesto. It's how you do things. Well, okay, you're saying you want to source local wherever possible. You want to treat every customer like a friend, but are you? Are you really? And your values as well. Like, your values are how you want to be perceived by your customers and the wider world. We want to be innovative. We want to be friendly. We want to be warm, authentic. But again, how are you demonstrating those things? And that's the difference between words and an authentic brand. So if you do them, then you're an authentic brand. Because again, for me, being an authentic brand is simply just having a why that's bigger than money, but actually doing the things to make that real in the world. And that's, everything flows from that. That is your guide for all your business decisions, not just branding and marketing. As well, having that vision, and it should be part of the guide to your for your business decisions, because this is where we're trying to get to. And again, you can communicate it. And so I think it's very important to do the work on that. And then afterwards as well, like, whenever you're communicating, of course you can talk about, well, this is our purpose, this is our vision. But you can't repeat the same sentence every day. But what you can do is, when you talk about stuff, is say, well, because our purpose is this, because our purpose is to educate the world about Italian food, that's why we're going to talk about it. That's why we're launching a book. Because our mission is to, one of our mission, part of our manifesto is to only source locally. We're going to make our lives really hard and try and spend more money to try and work within that, because our value is innovation. That's why we're going to do some crazy stuff on Instagram, or we're just going to mess around and do a special that's just a bit crazy that we don't know where it's going. So every time you're relating it back to your purpose, mission, vision, and values. And that's what helps you stand out and makes customers see that there is a higher purpose that you do, that only you can do, that helps you stand out.
It's very interesting when you talk about manifestos and the values, because I'm in another business. We are part ways through that journey, and it's really hard, because exactly that business with two founders, and we're discussing the manifesto, and it's like, you find out how different you see small things, and it's that those small things, and actually aligning on that and calibrating on what you're gonna do then as you put that manifesto out, because suddenly you put out a promise, and if you don't live up to that promise, that's going to be hard. And I think some of the best businesses in the world, I think almost one of the first thing you will find on their website is their manifesto, and they will live up to that, taking Ben & Jerry's again, or Honest Burger, to be very clear about what they're not about, and much about what are we.
And it's hard, especially, and it's hard. It will cost more money. It will take more time. And especially with hospitality, when life gets in the way and things are busy, and maybe, with all the challenges that are coming up, it's very easy to drop it. And that's the difference, again, between an authentic brand and not, is we're still, that we do this first, and then we work around that, not the other way. We don't just force this purpose and substance into all the other stuff. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
What has been like your most significant learning when it comes to building cult brands over the last 2 years? Because it has been a rough and shaky ride, and you just said there's probably more coming around the corner, what makes it even harder. But what is like your biggest learning with this, and are you seeing more taking this up? Would be another question.
So I'd say, well, I got two. One very quick one, which again, just to bang the drum, is just do the work. Do the work on your brand. Get that framework, who you are, who your customers are, why they should care about you. You could just do it in a day or a couple of days. You don't have to pay someone like me to do it. And it will make things so much more efficient. It will make your story so much better. It will make you so much prouder of your brand and excited to share that. So that's just a small one. And then just something that I learned a lot working with some of the, I'd say I tend to work with restaurant chains that don't want to lose their independent spirit, that don't want to be seen as chains. And so when I work with Flatiron, who are an incredible brand, what I learned from them, and I've seen this, I did a very small project for Dishoom years ago, another incredible brand. Same thing, I'm doing a project with OE Vegan at the moment. Same thing again. I just see this consistently come up again and again for the brands that do have that line around the block, even when it's raining, that which every restaurant wants. And it's quite a boring answer, but they are obsessed with details and their experience. Now, of course, you think, well, hospitality people are, but it is noticeable there that every single aspect is looked into and like, how can we make this the best that it can be? And we never stop evolving it, from the team, from the culture, to maybe 3 things that they give away, to the interiors. It's going the extra mile every time. And again, talking about having principles, that's just the way you do things. No matter what it costs, we will obsess over giving you the best possible experience. So not the sexiest answer, but that's the common thread that I keep seeing. And having had a chance to look under the hood of how some of these incredible businesses work, that's what I see keep coming up again and again.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's about that whole, their part of the manifesto where they commit to excellence in principle and mastery within whatever they do and their products. And that comes through in everything they do. What about we already touched a bit about the future looks a bit murky. What is your prediction for hospitality, and how are you seeing things right now for your side of the table, especially when it comes to, are we going to see more cult-driven brands rising here because there's opportunity in difficult times as well?
Yeah, so I don't want to be. Look, I'm a positive guy. We've all been through a lot. I don't want to be a doomsayer. The things are going to be challenging. We know why. We don't need to go into details on that. I would say, again, I'm biased, but it has never been more important to give customers a reason to choose you, and also to get that emotional connection, because they're going to be eating out less. They're going to have less money. People will always spend money on food, whether it's a QSR, whether it's a Michelin star. People are always going to have special occasions, but they're really going to think about their choices. So you need to be obsessed about throwing the emotional kitchen sink at them to get that loyalty. And in terms of the actual, I'm seeing it more with I love hospitality, but it's always tends to be the last to catch up. So I am seeing more with other brands, whether it's fashion or FMCG, are doing a much better job and getting this fact that they have to tell a more human story, not just bang on about their product all the time. I just hope that hospitality can catch up with that, because the problem, as I think we discussed, is that hospitality tends to be very insular, whereas really they should be looking at the people that are smashing it, And I think as well, like when I look generally in the world of, let's just say, retail in general and where it's going, and this is what gets me interested, and I think if you stop seeing yourself as a restaurant, and see yourself more, I hope this doesn't sound so too cheesy, but as like providing food-based solutions to people that love you, and combine making money with making more impact. So what I mean by that is, if you look at the restaurant, and this other retail businesses are doing this more, it's almost like your flagship shop front. What are the other ways that we can then A, make money, and B, be in our customers' lives more, which becomes a win-win thing. So that's, whether it's meal kits or launching at home products like sauces, doing more events, or, NFTs, not saying you should do that, but whatever it is, I think that's, if you want to really future-proof yourself, is to sort of just to see how else can we protect ourselves and make money. And the thing, it all comes back to story, because the more you have an engaged community that love you, the more they're willing to buy from you, because like Ben and Jerry's, because like Honest, because they trust you and they know that you're the good guys. And because you share your process, they know you're going to put your heart and soul into this. So they're going to be way more willing to buy whatever you have to sell, just as much for the product, but as much to be part of the game. if that makes sense. So I think that's an interesting direction. We're seeing, like, I'm seeing, you are starting to see with hospitality businesses, especially with all the sort of pivots and over lockdown, where they're realizing actually, selling food in our restaurant is just but one way to make money, and we're actually quite experienced and good at running businesses. And I hope that inspires people that that you can use this to make more to protect yourself more and find new revenue.
And it's very interesting. Then you talk about the future as well, and you said also about get your inspiration from outside hospitality. If you should mention like your top favorite brands, top three favorite cult brand outside hospitality, what would they be then? If people had to go and look at something else.
Okay, I've got two that immediately jump out, and let's see if the third one comes. So my favorite of all brands, the brand that ticks every cult brand box, is called Omsom, and they are American-based Asian meal kits. They've only been running for about 2 years. They've sold 500,000 kits. They were in Fast Company's most innovative brands of 2022. And why I love them so much is they embrace sort of all. It's like if I had a brand, it's how I'd be doing it. So their brand motto is loud and proud. Again, not for everyone, but so they're very sort of forthright and outspoken, but they obsess over their brand lovers, which is so important. Like they know who their brand lovers are, which are Asian Americans, and they talk about the things that are important to them. So they'll talk about racism, why MSG isn't bad for you, just all the negative stereotypes around that. And when they do, they're getting hundreds of comments on Instagram, so much more than other hospitality brands that I see. Another thing that I really believe in is that they give a lot of value and share their passions outside of just buying my product. So they'll talk about like midnight munchies, stuff you can make from the freezer, little hacks and tips, because they know that their customers love food. They do things for their community. They launch merchandise, things like rice paddles, or they did a limited edition Mai Tai boxing shorts. And I'm sure it makes some revenue, but it's just as much about just having fun and collaborating with people. And I think just something that's really, really interesting is they share their process and they share their journey. And I know that's so counterintuitive to people. It's like, but we're a brand. We're not going to, show our diagrams of how we do things. But they talked about how they built their brand and how they got this loud and proud brand. And again, it had hundreds of comments because people were so into the journey, they wanted to know. And again, we're just humans. This is what we're trying to do. These are the challenges. And this is all the stuff that's happening underneath the food that you eat. And if you share enough and are open enough, people are really going to care. So, Omsom, which I would recommend anyone to check out and really take a bit of time looking through how they approach their posts and their newsletter and how they communicate. Another brand, I love Hiut Jeans, if you're familiar with them. They are based in Wales. I know them really well. Yeah, brilliant story again about how they wanted to re-energize this town in Wales that industry had left, that made a lot of, that used to be the jean making capital of the UK. And so they started with their purpose. But they just do a lot of interesting things to share their values. They'll do events. They do a thing where they have like an open Zoom call, so any of their customers can just jump in and chat with them about whatever on Zoom. They're always doing talks. Speakers, they're running events because their whole thing is try and do one thing very well, trying to be better at it every day. So they take that value and they try and share that in as many ways as possible with their community. So I thought that was interesting. And then let me just say one that just caught my attention. I know this comes up a bit recently, was Liquid Death Water, who I don't necessarily like. They're not my kind of brand 100%, but they said an interesting thing, because you think like water, you constantly see new water brands come and sort of desperately trying to find an angle. And their angle was, how can we make a water that a rock star would love to drink? And I just thought that was really clever. So they just made this very bold, exciting, outspoken, rebel. And again, they knew their audience and like who would be receptive to that. And they've taken a simple product like water, and then it just shows just creating a community around the shared outlook and values. I just remember reading a stat that 90% of people who did leave a brand left a brand because the other brand shared their outlook and values more. So you can apply that to any products. It's just more than the product. So yeah, those are three that stand out for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting as you mentioned them. I was thinking because I know Hiut Jeans, the two others I will definitely look into, and I studied Hiut Jeans a lot. They're just so clear about who their customers are, and they really, they care about them and only them, and therefore they're not discounting others, but they know exactly these who these customers are. They're talking to them, and you can see in social media where also I notice. I sent my jeans for repair, and then I've noticed there was like an Instagram thing where you can follow the repair process over the week, and then suddenly you see a picture of your jeans. You feel really, oh wow, it's my jeans. They took a picture of my jeans. And it's so simple but so clever, and it's run by that employee that does the repair. And I think that's so clever, and it's such a small thing. But again, imagine if you could show how your product starts as flour to come out to that product and follow that employee or whatever it is you can do it. I think it's so clever done. How do you keep on innovating and learning new things? Because you need to build that counterintuitive into when you work with your clients. How do you actually sharpen your skills to mastery in building cult brand? Because that's an ever evolving thing, I could imagine.
Sure. Well, the number one thing is, so I mean, I have ADHD, and for me, being organized and having a system is so important. And I'd say as much, and if I can do it, I know that anyone else, because it was a torturous process. Because it's in hospitality as well. I see there's this look, hospitality can be tough and it can be chaotic, but it's a story that a lot of people tell themselves is that I work in hospitality, it's all chaos. I can never organize myself. I would challenge that to an extent. Of course, especially at the moment, there are times, well, another way to put it, when you're in the ship, there's no other way to put it. But I would strongly, yeah. So building a system and making time, fixing in time for the things that need to happen. And as part of that, so delegating again wherever I can, because again, for hospitality people, like if you want to make this impact and have the business of your dreams, you can't do it single-handedly. Even though you have a team, you've got to see where you can delegate. So just learning where I can delegate as well. And again, that just comes up to freeing up my time to educate myself. So you can drown yourself in courses and books, and I was guilty of that in the beginning. I think a lot of other people do. But there has to be, you have to fix in a level of time to make self-improvement. And what I found is when you fix in time, because time expands to fill, if you want to work 7 days a week, you'll work 7 days a week. If you start that same list and say, I'm going to do it in 4 days a week, you'll get it done in 4 days. And again, like with founders that I've worked with as well, the ones that I really connect with, the ones who I see who are smashing it, they, again, without fail, have all tried to educate themselves on brand as well, whether it's talking to people like me, doing podcasts, like listening to podcasts or reading books or going to talks. So for me, they're the most pleasurable to work with, but also they're the ones who are doing really well. And again, it's not a coincidence. So yeah, finding the time to delegation, through having a system to educate yourself have certainly been key things for me. And actually maybe one other thing that I've learned the hard way recently as well, and I'd say it applies as much to me as to anyone with a business, is just taking the time to measure everything and like what are the key indicators for what you're doing, and just to see if it's working or not, and then just review it and just keep iterating and testing. Again, as an ADHD person, that was a hard journey for me to learn, but I kept looking back and thinking, well, what worked? And then I just realized I don't know, because I've just thrown everything against the wall. And I think, again, in hospitality, a lot of us are guilty, which we feel the pressure, you're desperate to get customers through the door, so you throw everything against the wall. I think even that first restaurant launch I did, which I just would describe the method as throwing everything against the wall. But then we had to do another launch and another launch. And then I realized, oh, actually, I haven't taken that many, I haven't built enough of a system around that. So that's been really key for me as well. And I strongly recommend as well, it doesn't have to be fixing that time every week. Let's just review. Let's review the stats. Let's review the customer reviews. What can we do better? What are we going to test this week, etc.
Great, Dan. Last question before we wrap up. Is there one question you wished I'd ask you? And if there is, what would that question be, and what would you answer?
Yeah, you've talked about a lot of my favorite subjects. I guess one, on the other hand, is you can say, well, if you're going to social media to entertain people, why don't you just drown your feed in memes and gifs like some of the fast food chains do? It's just because this is just something that I've noticed recently, and I think it's a good contrast to help people understand the importance of telling a story. Is again, the brands that I tend to work with, that even if you're a chain, but you have a higher purpose and you want to create this incredible product and experience, is when I look at all the standard fast food chains. Now they're very good at what they do. There's only so much you can talk about a Big Mac, say, and it's, there are people that love it, and that's fine. But what they do is they drown people in memes and GIFs and all this entertainment stuff, which is clever, because what else are they going to talk about? And they do very well at that. But the problem is actually, for most hospitality brands, their customers come to them for precisely the opposite reason. They come because they want to come to someone that stands for something. They want to hear about the story. They want to hear about a process and how much people care about the things that they're putting into your body. And so what I find is that it's, let's say on one end of the scale, you have the fast food brands. On the other end of the scale, you have the tiny handful of brands that are doing this great human story, but everyone else is in the middle. And it's so neutral. And actually what you're doing is you're hiding your biggest asset, which is that you care and you have this great product, and you're letting the people that don't have a good product win just by doing pretty shallow stuff. So, don't hide your biggest asset.
Yeah, I think that was a really, really good question, and very good advice as well, because I think also it's not because people don't want to do it, but also they feel awkward, and maybe that's not what they feel comfortable, and therefore they should go and find the help to feel comfortable, because it really accelerate their business, because often people don't know what they don't know. So, and it's your job as the founder to get in front of that business again, coming back to what we talked about earlier. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming on the show and talking about how we build a cult brand and scale the story. It's absolutely incredible to hear your experience and what you're looking at as you are helping great businesses developing their brand. So where can people find you if they want to check out some of the work you've been doing or connect with you? Where are the best places?
Sure. So I'm mainly active on LinkedIn. That's because I've fallen slightly out of love with Instagram. So you can find me, Dan Nash, on Instagram. I've also got my cult brand mail, which is I share every 2 weeks just tricks and tips to inspire you to have how to get more love from your customers. You can find me there. You can sign up at brandstories.club. And just the final thing is I offer a few free cult brand workshops every month for founders, just to help give you a bit of clarity on where you are and where you'd love to be. So hit me up if that sounds interesting. Yeah, otherwise that was great. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much again. So we will put all the lovely company names you mentioned and during the interview in the show notes, so everybody will be didn't get it as you were listening in. There will be in the show notes for the different company, Hiut Jeans and so on. So thank you again, Dan. Great stuff, Dan. Really some great practical advice on how to build a cult brand. What can you do now to build a brand that people rave about? If you want to learn more about how building brands that stands out and makes better impact, tune in to episode number 20, Your Brand as a Promise, with Cliff Ettridge, partner at the team. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bringing great insight, strategies and tools to help leaders become better every day. Check them out at bizsimply.com or via their social at bizsimply or bizsimplyhq. You can email them directly at advice@bizsimply.com. A big thank you to Fina Charlson, who is the show producer and editor from the Podcast Collective. I really appreciate that you are listening in. So if you enjoyed today's conversation, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of the channels, which all can be done via the website, hospitalitymavericks.com. If you have any ideas or feedback for the show or thoughts, reach out to me via LinkedIn or via my email, michael@hospitalitymavericks.com. Tune in next time for another interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us, subscribe to the newsletter via hospitalitymavericks.com. I'm Michael Tingsam, and you've been listening to the Hospitality Maverick podcast show. Be Maverick.